Welcome to the deep dive. We've got quite a stack of source material in front of us today.
We certainly do.
Specifically, we're diving into excerpts from a book called Don't Divorce: Powerful Arguments for Saving and Revitalizing Your Marriage. It's published by Regnery Publishing.
Yeah, and that title, well, it tells you the perspective straight away, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
This isn't trying to be, a perfectly balanced look at all relationship outcomes. It's really focused on building a case against divorce.
Right. And for the idea that, working to save a marriage, even a tough one, might actually be the better way to go.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to unpack the arguments presented in this specific source. We want to pull out the key insights, the surprising bits, the stories they used.
So you, our listener, can get a really good handle on this particular viewpoint without having to read the whole thing yourself.
Think of it as the essential toolkit of arguments, just from this one source.
Got it.
And this source, well, it doesn't hold back. It jumps right in, challenging a really common idea.
Well,
The idea that divorce is like the path to greater personal happiness. Leave the bad situation, find yourself, be happier.
right, the liberation narrative.
Exactly. But this source argues actually the opposite is often true, that divorce can leave people less happy.
And it connects this, I believe, to a bigger idea about how marriage itself has fundamentally changed.
Yes, precisely. It argues the whole purpose and sort of definition of marriage has shifted dramatically in our culture, and that creates new problems.
Okay, let's start there then. How does the source describe that shift? What does marriage mean now, according to them?
Well, it argues marriage used to be seen primarily as an institution, solid, based on duties, central to how society worked.
Like a bedrock kind of thing.
Right. But now it's seen more as just an emotional commitment, something that's, well, open to constant reassessment based purely on how you feel.
So less about structure and permanence, more about personal feelings moment to moment.
That's the argument. And they link this to some big cultural shifts. One obvious one is women entering the workforce in huge numbers, changing traditional family roles.
Okay, that makes sense.
Another is this broader cultural move away from, say, do your duty, obligations, towards prioritizing personal feelings, like follow your heart.
The personal happiness ethic, I think they call it, or the me decade idea.
Exactly. The idea that my individual fulfillment comes before maybe the commitment to the relationship itself.
And how does this play out in modern relationships, according to the source?
Well, they point to things like what they call an easy sex culture. Hookups being really common, especially among college students. They cite figures like 60 to 80%.
Wow.
And cohabitation, living together unmarried, is described as the new normal. Over half of young adults do it.
So marriage becomes optional, or something you do much later.
Kind of. Often delayed until after kids arrive, even. It's presented as less central.
What about, media? Social media, how does that fit in?
The source argues they really reinforce this fragility. Media messages often push this idea of taking care of yourself by, well, getting out if you're unhappy.
Yeah, prioritize yourself.
And social media. It can become this place to vent anger, which the source says might actually make things worse, not better.
Oh, interesting. Like amplifying the negativity.
Yeah. And it also provides, instant support for leaving. Friends chime in. You deserve better.
Uh-huh. They even mention something about divorce being contagious.
They do. They cite studies suggesting divorce can actually spread through social networks, like among friends.
That's kind of wild. Like a social contagion.
Yeah, it's presented as evidence of how much our social environment influences these really personal decisions.
Okay. And there was also a point about pornography. What's the source's take there?
Right. It argues that the easy access to porn disconnects sex from real intimacy within marriage. It objectifies people, sets unrealistic expectations.
Creates sort of fantasy world that real life can't match.
Pretty much. And it can infiltrate one partner's thoughts, weakening the actual connection. They use a story, Robert and Angie's, where his hidden porn use just drove this wedge between them.
Okay, so the picture is marriage is under pressure from culture, changing norms, media, even things like porn. So, given that, let's get to the core argument. The harms of divorce itself.
Yeah, and they really detail these. They talk about tactics like chop and run divorce.
What is that?
It's basically when one partner just abruptly leaves, blindsiding the other person in the family. They use Jackie and Kevin's story as an example. He just vanished from the family home.
Oof. That sounds brutal. Avoids the hard conversation, I guess.
Exactly. It's portrayed as a cruel way to avoid responsibility.
So beyond tactics, what about the personal costs? The source challenges that whole divorce equals liberation idea. Pretty hard, right?
Totally. It argues it actually harms self-esteem, leads to serious long-term health issues, and definitely lowers the standard of living for, well, everyone involved. Spouses, kids, everyone.
It frames divorce as a choice with really severe lasting consequences.
You mentioned health impacts. What specifically does the source link to divorce? Are there studies?
Oh, yeah. They lean heavily on studies. They mention sociologist Linda Waite's work. Her long-term studies found divorced people reported about 20% more chronic health problems.
20%, like what kind of problems?
Things like heart disease, diabetes, even cancer, compared to people who stayed married continuously.
Wow, that's significant.
It really is. And there's another one, a British study on heart attack survivors. Divorced patients were 21% less likely to survive than married ones.
Goodness. So it's not just emotional stress, it's physical health, too.
Absolutely. They talk about lack of sleep, anxiety, just intense distress. They even mention writer Wendy Paris describing her post-divorce rage as orangutan therapy, just sheer primal anger.
Yikes.
And get this, the source also claims that, based on studies, most people who were married and then become single never fully recover physically from the divorce strain, even if they remarry later.
Never fully recover. Physically. That's a heavy claim.
It is.
Okay, what about the money side? The financial costs.
The source paints a pretty bleak picture there, too. Financially ruinous, basically.
Yeah.
Your former partner, who you built wealth with, becomes this force demolishing it.
Demolishing it. How?
Well, through the division of assets, legal fees.
Mm.
And it argues that lower-earning spouses, often women who focused on childcare, get hit hardest because those non-financial contributions are just undervalued in the split.
And the legal process itself,
And
expensive.
hugely. Lawyers charging hundreds an hour, $250, $450, sometimes more, plus paralegals, retainers. Cases get complicated, cost way more than people expect.
Right.
It even mentions nasty tactics like conflicting out attorneys.
Inflicting out.
Yeah, where one spouse quickly consults with several top divorce lawyers in town, even if they don't hire them, just to prevent the other spouse from being able to hire them due to conflict of interest rules.
Wow, that's playing dirty.
Exactly. Which leads to another point the source makes: moral compromise.
Yeah.
It suggests the whole process can make people act, well, unethically. Using harsh language, being deliberately nasty, employing those dirty tricks to get an edge, especially with money. Your moral compass goes akimbo, as they put it.
Okay, so we've got personal well-being, health, finances, even ethics. But the impact on children seems like the biggest point of harm in the source's view.
Oh, absolutely central. It says, quite bluntly, that divorce ruins the project of raising happy children.
Ruins it. That's strong.
It is. It argues kids get the message that their parents' happiness or choices come first, before the kids' need for stability. They have to cope with living in two differing realities if there's joint custody.
And studies back this up, according to the source, widespread negative effects.
Yes, it claims studies consistently show pervasive and harmful consequences. A big one they highlight is difficulty forming stable romantic relationships as adults.
Like long-term effects on their own love lives.
Yeah. They use terms like commitment phobia. It references Elizabeth Joy Lamont's work, talking about kids divorced later, choosing candy bars over apples. Quick, maybe unhealthy relationships instead of stable ones. Or renting over buying when it comes to commitment.
Choosing temporary over permanent.
Right. They give examples like Harlan, who only had short-term relationships, or Patty, whose divorced parents led to none of her siblings maintaining two-parent homes themselves. It suggests a cycle.
So even if the parents manage a good divorce, relatively low conflict, it's still bad for the kids.
That's what the source argues explicitly. Even low-conflict marriage divorces are seen by the kids as personal tragedies. Just the splitting up of the family unit is the trauma.
And the court system, that becomes a big factor.
Huge and often negative. Life becomes governed by a court-decreed schedule. Parents lose that natural flexibility over school choices, religious stuff, healthcare. It's all potentially locked into legal orders.
Yeah.
They reference Robert Emery on that.
So stressful.
Terribly. Dealing with the system. The source mentions the Diane Medved study, examples of parents having schedules taped by the phone, living by the court's clock.
Wow. There was also a connection made between divorce rates rising and the impact of father absence.
Yes, the source links the big jump in divorce from the mid-60s to early 80s directly to evidence showing that father's absence negatively impacts kids.
So it's not just about having two parents versus one, but the specific role of the father.
Exactly. It argues a father isn't just extra help. He's a joint shaper of values, a key masculine role model. They cite David Blankenhorn and even use an anthropological example from the Trobriand Islands to emphasize the unique cultural importance of fatherhood.
Okay, so a very, very detailed case for the harms of divorce. But the book's title isn't just against divorce, it's for saving and revitalizing marriage. Let's shift there. What's the argument for staying and working on it?
Well, the core idea is that the process of working through marital problems is actually good for you, for both partners.
Good for you. How so? It sounds painful.
It can be, sure.
Hmm.
But the argument is it builds personal growth. Overcoming big issues teaches you resilience, gives you skills for the future, not just in the marriage, but elsewhere too.
Ah, like learning from the struggle.
Exactly. And facing the tough stuff forces self-insight. You have to look at your own part in the problems, areas where you need to change. And just learning better communication, figuring out how to accommodate your partner better, that improves daily life right away.
And it stresses shared responsibility. It's not just one person's fault.
Absolutely. Very firm on that. Both partners contributed to the breakdown, so both can and should lead the recovery. He uses that line, look squarely in the mirror, because some part of the problem is you.
Even if you feel like the victim.
Right. Your reaction, your patterns, they're part of the dynamic too.
And this is where those surprising study findings come back in, about happiness.
Yes. Back to Linda Waite and others. This is maybe the most counterintuitive point. The source highlights findings that unhappily married adults who stayed married were actually more likely to say they were happy 5 years later than those who divorced.
Wait, say that again? Staying unhappy made them happier than getting divorced.
That's what the cited studies apparently found for a significant number of people. And, on average, divorce didn't improve depression or self-esteem compared to the unhappy folks who stuck it out.
That really flies in the face of common wisdom.
It does. And another kicker, they found that most divorces they studied, 74%, happened to couples who said they were happy just 5 years before. And for those couples, divorce actually decreased their happiness.
So for people who are recently happy, divorce made things worse, happiness-wise.
According to this data, yes.
Yeah.
It suggests that path to happiness via divorce is often, well, maybe not real.
Okay. What about the old idea of staying for the kids? How does the source frame that? Is it just about sacrifice?
It argues staying for the family unit is actually a positive good, not just for the kids giving them stability, but for the parents too. It provides a shared future, a shared project.
So not just grim sacrifice, but actual benefits for the parents.
Right. It pushes back on framing it as only sacrifice. Focus on the joys of raising kids together, they suggest. And it warns that jumping into a second marriage probably won't make you happier either. You don't get a clean slate, especially with kids and blended family complexities.
Okay, so if someone is convinced by these arguments to stay and work on it, what practical things does the source suggest? How do you actually revitalize the marriage?
Well, a big starting point is changing yourself. Your own responses, your patterns, even if your partner isn't changing yet. They call these unilateral strategies.
So start with me, even if I think they're the problem.
Pretty much. The idea is changing your half of the dance can change the whole dance. They suggest getting help, maybe from a sharp friend or a therapist, to see your own part clearly and figure out new ways to react.
Focus on internal change first. What else?
A huge one is acceptance. Consciously choosing to accept your partner as they are, flaws included. Stop trying to change their fundamental personality.
That's hard.
It is. But the source pushes this we're on the same team mindset. Stop seeing your partner as the enemy. Constant blaming, they say, is just mean and doesn't work anyway. They mention traditional elders' wisdom about acceptance.
Okay. Communication always comes up. What's the advice there?
Acknowledge it's usually about emotion, not pure logic. In marital fights, learn what sets your partner off, their trigger words, sensitivities, and consciously practice getting better at talking and listening.
Any specific techniques mentioned?
It briefly mentions things like avoiding escalation, maybe using a sandwich technique for criticism, positive, negative, positive, but it doesn't go super deep into specific methods in the excerpts we saw.
Got it. How about rebuilding connection, affection?
The idea is you have to actively recultivate appreciation and desire. Don't just relax after you're married. Keep admiring, keep pursuing your partner like you did when dating.
Keep the effort going.
Yeah. And actively share interests. Don't just drift apart because you stop paying attention to each other's worlds. They give this example comparing two wives. One actively listened to her banker husband's day. The other tuned out her dentist husband's work talk. The first marriage was stronger.
So, consciously choose to grow back together, not apart.
Precisely.
Commitment and duty also seem like strong themes.
Very strong. Marriage is framed as this deep commitment that should override temporary feelings or fights. They even use a funny line from Married with Children. Bunnies are losers, not quitters, to illustrate sticking together for the family even if it's messy.
Huh. Okay.
The idea is sometimes duty comes first and the heart follows. They tell a story about caring for a spouse with cancer. The commitment holds things together even when positive feelings are strained. But it's voluntary commitment, not forced.
What about this idea of winning by letting go?
That's about choosing your battles.
Mhm.
Consciously deciding not to engage with every little conflict or annoyance. It's not being weak, it's taking control by not letting the disagreement derail the whole relationship or your own peace, letting things melt away.
Strategic non-engagement.
Sort of. And related is acting as if you were happily married.
Fake it till you make it.
Kinda, but more actively. Generate affection and respect through your actions, even if the feelings aren't totally there at first. Use little appreciative messages, like from Nancy Dreyfuss's book they mentioned. Invest time and attention that makes you feel more connected.
Action leads to feeling.
Right, and sacrifice is part of it, giving up being right sometimes. Overcoming indifference, they mention anthropologist David Skinner learning about paleo dieting just to connect with his wife's passion. That kind of effort.
Finally, the source mentions marriage being elastic, like a rubber band. Yeah.
Exactly, put a rubber band on it. Marriage isn't static. It has to stretch and adapt to big changes. Kids, illness, job changes, aging. You have to expect change, watch how the marriage is doing, and be ready to adapt roles and expectations.
Like the who moved my cheese idea, but for marriage.
That's a good way to put it. The main point is marriage is what you make it. You can renegotiate things, create new ways of being together.
Okay, lots of strategies focused on internal work, effort, choice. But what about really tough stuff like infidelity? How does the source handle that?
It tackles it head on. And one of the first things it notes is how surprisingly common affairs are, even in marriages people say are happy.
Really? Even in happy marriages?
Yeah, they cite studies where like 56% of men and 34% of women who had affairs actually rated their marriages as happy or very happy at the time.
Wow. That cuts against the idea that affairs only happen when things are already terrible.
It really does. The source suggests affairs are often driven more by the individual's needs, wanting excitement, validation, attraction. They give examples. Chet's midlife crisis affair, Sarah and Brett whose networking turned into something more, Evan's affair with a student.
So it's not always about the marriage itself being bad?
Not necessarily, according to these examples. It could be about the person's internal state or external opportunities.
So is infidelity an automatic endgame in the source's view?
No, definitely not. While it's clear, lying, cheating, it's wrong, it's devastating. The source argues it doesn't have to kill the marriage.
It gives examples.
Yeah, it contrasts Hillary Clinton staying with Bill after his affairs versus Arnold Schwarzenegger's marriage ending after his was revealed. The point is, couples can choose to stay and try to recover. The affair is often more about the betrayer's issues, not the faithful spouse being inadequate.
What about that saying, once a cheater, always a cheater?
The source calls that a destructive rationalization.
Why destructive?
Because it just shuts down any possibility of change or healing. It assumes the worst and prevents any attempted recovery. The source insists recovery is possible, but it takes huge effort, vigilance, dedication, often therapy from the one who cheated, and deep healing for the one who was hurt.
And it has advice for the betrayed spouse, too.
Yes, a strong warning not to let the affair blow up the entire family out of anger or hurt, calling it cutting off nose to spite face, damaging your own future, the kid's well-being, just to punish the cheater.
Tough advice when you're hurting. How about preventing affairs?
For people who know they might be tempted, it suggests building strong routines and rituals that bind you to your partner, require your attention and investment in the marriage. The idea is you feel closest to where you put your energy.
Makes sense. Invest in the marriage to protect it.
Right. It also distinguishes between a one-time lapse and serial adultery, suggesting the latter might be a deeper character issue. And a side note, divorcing a narcissist is flagged as potentially especially hellish.
Okay. And it loops back to pornography here, too.
Just briefly reiterates the point that porn normalizes disconnected sex and can weaken that marital intimacy, potentially contributing to the environment where affairs might happen.
Got it. Now, the source also looks at the exit process, the whole business around getting divorced. What's its take?
It sees the growth of helpers like life coaches and divorce planners as, well, a symptom of marriage being fragile. These professions are seen as part of an infrastructure that actually facilitates divorce.
And it's particularly skeptical of life coaches,
Yeah, it raises concerns because they're often unlicensed and their focus tends to be on the individual's happiness and goals.
which could undermine the marriage.
That's the argument. By boosting ego, encouraging follow your heart, they might inadvertently push someone towards leaving rather than working on the relationship. The source suggests a good friend could offer similar support without that potential bias towards divorce.
So it views the whole support system around divorce as an industry.
Explicitly calls it the divorce industry. Lawyers, accountants, investigators, coaches, involved in an exit process that basically monetizes broken hearts.
Monetizes broken hearts? Ouch.
Yeah. It even points to things like the breakup shop online or the RX breakup app as examples of how ending relationships has become a commodity.
What legal options does it mention for divorce?
It outlines the main ones. Litigated divorce, which it compares dramatically to Sekhmet, the Egyptian goddess of destruction, to show how fierce and damaging it can be.
Wow, vivid imagery.
Also collaborative divorce and mediation. It notes mediation often works well if it succeeds, but if it fails, you're back to square one, often having spent time and money. Settlement conferences, too. But the overall theme is always the high cost, financially and emotionally, and the complexity.
The source also points out specific times in life when marriages might be more vulnerable.
Yes, 3 key periods. First, starter marriages, marrying young, under 23 generally. Second, midlife crisis, divorces that search for excitement, often involving affairs. And third, gray divorce, the rising rate among older adults.
What's the issue with starter marriages, according to the source?
They undermine the whole idea of lifelong commitment and cause real devastation when they end quickly. Waiting until 23 or later to marry or cohabitate seriously seems to predict better outcomes based on the data cited.
And midlife divorce.
Often blindsides the family, causes huge loss. The source suggests alternatives like changing careers or actively enriching the existing marriage instead of blowing it up.
Okay. And gray divorce, why is that rising?
Partly due to second or third marriages failing, often before the 10-year mark. Also, sometimes happens after kids leave home and couples realize they've just grown apart, have totally separate lives. They give an example, Larry and Donna.
So empty nest syndrome hitting marriage?
Could be part of it. Though the source also argues longer first marriages are less likely to end. And it repeats the warning that remarriage, especially with blended families, is extremely difficult. Lots of potential conflict, resentment, uses Gideon and Shelley's story there. It does acknowledge conflicting stats on remarriage success, though.
Okay, this has been a really powerful case against divorce for most common problems. But surely the source acknowledges some situations where divorce is the necessary option.
Yes, absolutely. It is very clear about listing specific exceptions where divorce is presented as necessary.
And those are?
Primarily 3. 1, untreated addiction. When a spouse refuses help, won't involve the partner in recovery, keeps relapsing without addressing it. Lance's story is the example.
Okay, untreated addiction. What else?
2, emotional abuse. A consistent pattern that destroys self-worth, makes the victim believe the insults, causes physical symptoms of powerlessness.
Right, and the third?
3, physical abuse. That's presented as a clear-cut case for leaving, for safety.
So serious addiction and abuse are the main grounds where this source says divorce is warranted.
That's how it's presented. These are the necessary exceptions to the overall argument. However,
There's a catch.
there's a significant and frankly difficult caveat they add. Even in those high-conflict homes with abuse or addiction, the source argues divorce might still make the children's problems worse than if the couple somehow managed to fix the marriage.
Worse. Even with abuse or addiction in the home.
That's the challenging point they make. Because divorce itself brings its own trauma, the split, joint custody issues, ongoing conflict, which often continues anyway. It adds another layer of disruption for the kids.
Wow. That really underscores just how negatively this source views divorce across the board.
It absolutely does. It sees divorce itself as inherently damaging, especially for children, even when escaping a bad situation.
Okay, let's wrap this up. What are the source's final thoughts on perspective, reality, and finding happiness in marriage?
It comes back strongly to attitude. Choosing your response. It uses that pony in the manure analogy.
Right, look for the pony.
Exactly. Faced with a pile of manure, you can focus on the offal, or you can choose to believe there must be a pony in there somewhere and start digging. It uses Darlene the pessimist as an example of how attitude shapes your whole experience.
So perspective is key.
Yes, And it suggests sometimes the root problem in conflict isn't just the situation, but underlying temperament or personality traits in yourself or your partner. Identifying those, your own pony in the poop, so to speak, and the beliefs behind them is crucial for changing reactions.
Does it ultimately conclude marriage is a source of happiness?
Yes, definitely. Not the only source, but a significant one. It argues that committing to it, working through the hard stuff, actually increases overall life happiness. It quotes journalist Tara Parker Pope saying, "A good marriage is good for you by basically every measure."
And there was that interesting paradox it mentioned about how people view marriage.
Right. Polls show people think marriage in general is weaker today, more fragile. But most people say their own marriage is strong and happy. And despite all the perceived problems, most people still actually want to be married.
What about the idea of a good divorce? We hear that term a lot.
The source acknowledges the work done to help people cope after divorce, like by Constance Aarons. It doesn't dismiss that, but it strongly argues that the divorce itself is never good.
Why not?
It pushes back on studies claiming kids from good divorces do fine, saying they're often no better off on key outcomes than kids from messier divorces. The source's stance is clear. The goal shouldn't be a good divorce. It should be a good marriage.
So focusing on a good divorce might make leaving seem too easy or acceptable when maybe the marriage could be saved.
That seems to be the concern. Yes, it could lower the bar for giving up.
But it does end with some hope about love, even in struggling marriages.
It does. It suggests love often isn't gone, just buried under conflict and neglect, and that by working on the marriage, that love can be rediscovered. It mentions writer Mrs. Bazelon realizing, kind of sadly, after her divorce, how much love was still there.
Leaving you wondering if it could have been found before ending things.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's try to sum up the core case from these sources. Marriage has changed. It faces huge cultural pressures. Divorce, in this view, causes deep, lasting harm, personal, health, financial, and especially to kids.
Right. But the argument, backed by some surprising study data, is that staying and working it out is often the more realistic path to eventual happiness and growth.
And while it offers strategies focusing on yourself, acceptance, communication, commitment, adapting, it reserves divorce mainly for severe, untreated addiction or abuse.
Correct, though even then, it includes that heavy caution about the potential impact on children.
Well, we've definitely done a deep dive into the powerful arguments presented in these specific sources against divorce and for revitalization. What insights from this particular perspective resonated most with you, our listener?
And here's a final thought to chew on based on this material. If, as these sources argue, real lasting happiness isn't just a feeling you chase by leaving when things get rough, but something you actually build through commitment and effort within a marriage, well, how might that challenge or change how we approach the difficult times in our own most important relationships?